You're watching USG Hot Takes. I'm your host, A.T. Bianco. And today, our guest is sports writer and Stony Brook journalism professor, Wally Matthews. Wally, thanks for coming on here today.
My pleasure, man. You know, I've been waiting all day for this. I'm hungry.
Okay, I heard you didn't eat lunch either.
I did not. I waited for this.
All right, so before we get started, what's your experience with hot foods?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I got married in an Indian restaurant, and I'm not of Indian heritage, nor is my wife.
Okay.
But we got married there, and we had our reception there because we loved Indian food. And we like vindaloo. We like, as hot as they can make it. I don't know how this is going to stack up against that, but I'm pretty confident in my ability to handle it.
All right, well, that's great to hear. So we're ready to take on these sauces then?
I guess.
Gonna clink wings and cheers. Take one bite, and then we'll get into it.
Cheers. I might need another bite or two.
Not bad.
Very good.
It's like got a little bit of a habanero, like sweet taste to it. So we'll jump right into it. You grew up in Astoria, Queens.
Yes, I did.
Talk about growing up in Queens and what your upbringing was like, and whether or not you were, around sports your entire childhood.
Well, I was only there for 5 years.
Okay.
My parents moved us out here just before I started school, but we lived fairly close to Shea Stadium. My dad had grown up in Brooklyn, so he was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, so it was absolutely prohibited that we could be Yankee fans. We had to be Met fans.
Oh, wow.
We were raised to be Met fans, and which at the time wasn't a bad thing. It's not like today. There was a time when it really wasn't a shame to be a Met fan. So I saw Shea Stadium being built. I saw the Throgs Neck Bridge being built because it was right outside our window in Astoria. My memories there were that childhood was different in Queens. I mean, I think parents were different back then, but my mom would actually send me across the street to the grocery store when I was like 3 or 4 years old, like with a list and like a handful of money. And she'd say, give this to the man. His name was Mac. Give Mac this list, and he'll take the stuff off the shelves, and then you'll pay him, and you'll come home. Now, I can't imagine. Like my kids are in their 20s now. I wouldn't let them, go to the store by themselves. No, that's not true. But it was much more permissive back then.
So growing up, I guess in that environment, how have you seen that change? Raising your kids out in Long Island.
Well, it's funny because the thing is, when I was growing up there, and this is the late 50s, early 60s, my parents couldn't wait to get away from the city. They wanted to come out to Long Island because they thought it was a better place to raise kids, and the school district's better. My kids cannot wait to move off the island and get back to the city. In fact, one of my nieces lives in the apartment complex that I grew up in Astoria now. Just recently moved.
Wow.
There. So, everything has gone pretty much full circle.
That's really cool to hear. So you ready to get into this next sauce?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So this next sauce, you want to call it out for us and read it?
Sure, the ghost pepper and blueberry hot sauce.
So it's from the Bravado Spice Company. We'll cheers it up.
Clink.
Cheers, my friend.
Now, wait a minute. These are in order of intensity, right? Mm-hmm. This one does not seem as hot as that one.
No.
You
I
agree?
don't know. I agree with that. I
Maybe
don't
we
know
need
why.
another dash?
Do you want to do another dash?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the first. This is E first.
Nobody else does that?
Yeah. He's going to kick my butt in this interview, I'll tell you that.
Oh, I'm not. We're both going to enjoy all 5.
Oh, that's a little too much.
That's good. No,
One
that's
splash.
perfect.
There you
That's
go.
good.
I got you.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. One more bite.
Wow.
All right. So
That's really good.
we're cleaning wings off this one. Will over here, he likes to put that one on his cheeseburger.
Great idea.
So
That's really good.
it's not too bad. Got some blueberry. So you've worked for ESPN, Newsday, the New York Post, the New York Times, the New York Daily News, just to name a few.
You left out the New York Sun.
Yes. So you're also one of the only few local sports writers to write for the top 4 New York publications. And so what was your experience covering specifically baseball for any of those publications?
Well, we like to say, us baseball writers, and I've only been a baseball writer for 10 years, but now I consider myself one of the fraternity, that it's the toughest thing to cover because it's every single day. Spring training started 2 weeks ago, right? Middle of February. You are now with the team every single day just about between then and if you're with the Yankees, generally to the end of October.
Okay.
So you're talking about 7 or 8 months where you're spending more time with baseball players than you are with your own family. You're talking to a manager who does not want to talk to you twice a day, before and after every single game. You're in a workspace where you're not always welcome, quite honestly, and I can understand that. I mean, you're in a room where men are changing clothes and hanging out with their buddies and getting ready to go to work, and you're there with your little notebook and your tape recorder. So it gets to be a bit of a grind, but I love the game. I absolutely love the game. So the one time when I never feel like the job is a burden is when I'm watching the game. The rest of it can be a bit of a drudgery, and there are things to manage in terms of interpersonal relationships with players, with managers. Let's face it, after a month or so, we start to get sick of each other. Mm-hmm. But, it's a necessary evil, and we're there every single day. But the thing that I like about the baseball season is also the thing that I hate. You are there so often, so it gets to be a grind, but you are there so often that it's part of your life. It's like a daily soap opera, for 9 months. And when you miss a day, you come back and go, what did I miss? What happened yesterday? So it's really, it's cool. It's probably the coolest thing I've ever covered. I covered, a lot of boxing as well, but that was different because it was intermittent. There'd be maybe one fight a month, and you'd spend a week on the scene of that, and then you'd go away and you'd forget it, and then you do the next one. But this is like, you're almost part of a big family that sometimes hates each other, sometimes loves each other, and always tries to tolerate one another.
So in terms of, I guess, keeping stories fresh, with the amount of stories that you have to put out every day as a baseball writer, how have you dealt with that, kind of things getting old when you're going from game to game?
I find that things get old in spring training because after a while you can only play the same tune over and over again. Who's going to be the fifth starter?
Right.
Who's the last guy that's going to get cut? I mean, especially when I covered the Yankees for all those years, and they pretty much come to spring training knowing who's going to be on the team. There's very seldom any jobs that are open. It's usually the last guy off the bench and the fifth starter. Nobody really cares about either one of them, quite honestly. So that gets old. But once the season starts, I've always said, and I work with guys who complain about, the sameness of it. If you can't find a unique column every day out of a baseball game, you're not paying attention. I mean, there is something every single day. And I tried to teach you this last year. There is something every single day if you're looking, if you're paying attention. If you get to the point where you're on autopilot and, it's another game, right, you're going to say after a while, I have nothing to write. This happened yesterday. But there's always something every single day.
So in talking about that, the fact that there's something to write every single day, when teaching students specifically, do you kind of have trouble portraying that fact to students during class? Like what tips do you give them?
If you recall, and I said this last year in class, it's impossible to replicate the actual conditions of a sports writer in a classroom. You just can't.
Right.
Because we don't have the access to the things that I have the access to, and my colleagues have the access to. We don't have the same deadline pressure. We don't get to talk to the players. We don't even get the context. If I were to bring in, let's say, a tape of a baseball game that was played yesterday and made you sit down and watch it and write it, you're watching it in a vacuum. You don't know what happened before. You don't know what's going to happen after. The thing about being with a baseball team every day is that you do have that context. You've been there. You saw what happened 5 days ago when this guy pitched,
right.
Or the last time, that guy played shortstop. You have something, you have like a point of reference to draw upon. And these are things that you really can't replicate in a classroom. What I try to do, and if you recall, was I would give you something and say, hey, write it in a half hour, because I would try to replicate the hell
right.
of being a sports writer, which is, you don't know what to write, too damn bad. You need to have it with, in my hands in 30 minutes. But, as for the rest of it, there's really no substitute for actually being there.
So this class that you've taught, I was in it last year, about a year ago. It's Journalism 336. So any student that's interested in taking this course, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. You taught us one specific thing, or kind of pushed home one fact, the fact that if you can't sit down after a game with the whole crowd around you screaming or whatever during the 2 minutes left of the fourth quarter,
right.
Then maybe you're not shaped to be a sports writer. Talk about, I guess, that experience that you've had, say maybe your first time doing it.
Well, first of all, there's no shame in not being able to do that, because it's not for everybody. I don't pretend that what I do is brain surgery. It's not. It's not literature. It's not quantitative analysis, but what it is the ability to work very hard and intensely, concentrate, very, very focused for a short period of time under very pressureful conditions. And what I used to say to you guys was, if you think that you can sit in a stadium with 50,000 people screaming at you, knowing that the clock is ticking and you need to have your story done and the game is tied and you don't know what you're going to write, if you can stay calm, it's like what they say about airplane pilots. It's like long periods of boredom, occasionally interrupted by moments of sheer terror.
Right.
So if you can react, if you can function in those moments of sheer terror, you can do this. And that's another thing you can't replicate in a classroom. There's just no way I could put you in the bottom of the ninth inning of Game 7 of the World Series with Mariano Rivera pitching against the Diamondbacks, and the winning run is on second base, and you're very 10 minutes from deadline.
You got peanuts and beers
yeah,
going on.
And people are screaming at you. Right? It's crazy. I think in boxing, I had a couple of experiences like this as well, because when a fight ends, especially a big fight, a lot of people just pour down to the ring, come out of the crowd, and they will climb over your table, they will step on your computer. There is security there, but security only goes so far. But you have to be able to keep your head about you, because if you can't, you can't do the story. And I worked with I think I told you guys this story last year. I worked with a super talented guy at Newsday. I mean, still one of the best writers I've ever known. He covered college basketball, but he just hated that. He could not deal with deadline. And one day he just decided, and he was covering a St. John's Georgetown game in 1985 when the Big East was super important.
Wow.
St. John's was really good. Super important game. It was a Saturday afternoon. It wasn't even on it was maybe 3 in the afternoon. And he just said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. He just got up, walked out of the arena, never wrote another deadline story, and went on to, be a very good magazine writer. So that's why I say it's no shame, and it doesn't mean you're not a great writer. It just means that you don't have this particular capacity to do that one thing.
All right, that's good to hear, and I'm sure it's journalism students in itself want to hear something like that, especially ones in your class. A little bit of encouragement, or just one thing that I personally got from your class, took home, was how real you were about your actual experience. You weren't beating around any bush. You were telling us how it is. So we appreciate that, for real.
Oh, the other thing that I would point out is that the ability to work under those conditions is something you don't know that you can do until you try it. It's like I guess if you ever see magicians spin plates on their heads and all, you go out of the guy and find out he could do that. He just tried it one day and it worked. It's the same thing here. It's just something that you will never know whether you can do until you're actually thrown into that situation.
All right. So you ready for this big guy right here?
Now, who is this?
So you could read it for us, actually.
Well,
I think the title is, I have to take out the readers for this one.
He looks like he's screaming in agony.
It reminds me of the Sandlot.
Pain is good. It says Louisiana style batch 218 hot sauce. Okay.
All right. So we're going to clink wings here and get into it. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, yeah. There's some kick there.
Yeah. Kind of stings on the tongue a little bit.
Yeah.
So
actually, the sheer flavor, I like this one.
I like the reviews that you're doing on each sauce. That's one thing that we're missing for this show. So thank you for your input. So, you're the former president of the Boxing Writers Association, and
it's not as important as it sounds, by the way.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, and your experience as a boxing writer and how you were, interested in that.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't even know how I got into sports writing, quite honestly. I mean, you have to remember, I grew up during Watergate, and that pretty much riveted me when I was 17. And I thought, it's pretty cool to be a journalist at a time like this, and I wanted to be a political writer. I thought that's what I would do. And what happened was I covered, I did a few stories for my school paper at Post, and did a couple of other little freelance things for small papers, things like going to polling places and doing town meetings, and I found them boring, quite honestly. And I realized, maybe someday I'll be Woodward and Bernstein, but in the meantime, I'm going to have to go through a lot of this garbage. And quite honestly, the lowest Little League game is more fun than a town board meeting, even though it's not as important, although it's quite important to the parents and the kids who are playing it. But I started to gravitate that way. Now, what brought me to boxing was that I had been a boxer. When I was a kid, I was an amateur boxer. I was in the Golden Gloves, and I, always was around boxing gyms and all. So I figured if I'm going to write sports, I'm going to write about boxing. And I knew a lot about it. And this is one of the things, another thing that I taught in your class, if you're going to write sports, be an expert on the sport you're going to write. And it helped me tremendously that I wouldn't say I was an expert. I was 22 years old, but I knew a lot about it, from the inside. And I knew people in the industry. People in the industry knew me. I was able to make phone calls to certain people just because I had been around. And I understood, I could watch a fight and understand it and decode it. I couldn't do that in any other sport. I couldn't do it in baseball. I could never do it in hockey. I still can't to this day. Football, I can come close to it, but nothing approached the knowledge that the encyclopedic knowledge I had there. So that helped me big time, because when I got to Newsday, the boxing writer was a legendary guy named Bob Waters, who was one of, and this is going to go right over your head because it happened 60 years ago, but he was one of like 3 people in the United States who picked a guy named Cassius Clay to beat Sonny Liston.
Oh.
The world thought Cassius Clay was going to be killed because Sonny Liston was a mean guy. I mean, he made George Foreman look like, a sissy. He was a really tough guy. He'd been in jail for 10 years, and everybody was scared to death of him. But Waters picked Cassius Clay at the time. He didn't change his name to Muhammad Ali till the day after he won the fight, to beat Sonny Liston, and that made Waters' reputation. He was just a great boxing writer and a great guy. But when I started at Newsday in 1983, he was getting a little bit older, a little bored with it, a little jaded. So we became friends because of my interest in boxing. And whenever there was something he didn't want to do, he would say to the editor, "Richard, send the kid." So I was the kid, and I went. And, as history, as time goes on, he retired, and I just took over the boxing writing in Newsday. And luckily for me, the guys that were fighting in those days were guys named Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, Larry Holmes, later on a young man named Mike Tyson. So I was there when it was very important, and a lot of people would read your stuff. You were a very important writer. Now, most newspapers don't even have a boxing writer anymore. But it was a different era, and that's, to me, it was the happiest time of my journalistic life. I loved it. I loved what I was covering. I loved what I did. I loved the fact that when I wrote, people actually paid attention. They cared. And it really, not even covering the Yankees, and I covered, all 5 of their World Series championships, didn't really approach it.
That's an interesting thing to hear, specifically the comparison between, I guess, just boxing and baseball in itself.
Well, you know what the difference was? Part of the difference was, especially when Tyson was fighting, it was global.
Okay.
Like the world stopped on the night that they
to watch him.
Absolutely. The world stopped the night Hagler and Hearns fought. It stopped the night Hagler and Leonard fought. Obviously when Tyson fought for the title. The world does not stop for the World Series. Our world stops.
Right.
But, in Asia, they could not care. Really. I mean, now baseball's trying to go global, but it's not the same. Literally everybody would stop, and it would be on, those fights would be on a Monday night, believe it or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's usually not how
Well, now they're
is.
on Saturday nights,
Okay.
but back then, because they used them, they used to show them in movie theaters on closed circuit TV, and Monday was a slow night for movies. People just didn't go to the movies on Monday, because I guess they just came out of the weekend, just got back to work,
okay.
they wouldn't go, so the movie theaters would be empty. So that was the night when Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier fought on Monday night. Hagler and Leonard fought on Monday night. It's unheard of now because there's no longer closed circuit telecasts. Now you watch it in your house. Of course, everybody will stay home on Saturday night and watch a fight.
Of course.
It's all about economics. But on those Monday nights, the world would stop. When I was a kid and Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier fought, I was 14 in 1971. They wouldn't, in order to protect the gate and the closed circuit sales, they showed it in movie theaters, there was no radio broadcast. But what they did was you would put on like CBS AM, right, one of those news stations,
Right.
And at the end of every round, the AP would be allowed to give you a 50-word summary of the previous round. And we would
That's
sit,
it.
I swear to God, and we would sit there and wait. Like every 5 minutes, a bell would go off. They go ding, 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 ding. Here's the report of round 6, and then they would tell you, Ali landed 3 jabs and Frazier did this, and it was almost as exciting as actually being there.
Okay.
It was so cool. But I don't think I can really impress upon you in this day and age how important boxing was even 30 years ago.
And it's interesting hearing you saying that, because there is the kind of like this difference within time. You know, I would say probably back in 80s, 90s, it was more popular. Now probably leaning, like talent-wise, leaning not as what it was, I guess, before, watching, you know, fights like the Fury and Wilder fight.
Yeah.
I watched that, and it was a little bit, I felt like I was watching Rocky IV, like a little bit of a movie a little bit. So it's interesting to hear you say that. So when you were at Newsday, you told our class a story about how you first discovered Mike Tyson, of all names. How did you, like, what was the story behind that, and how did you get a chance to go and cover him?
Well, you know, I wouldn't say that I first discovered him. What happened was, I was now kind of the apprentice boxing writer behind Bob Waters, like 1984, and the people who were running Tyson's career very, very shrewdly made videotapes. These were, you know, good big VHS tapes, you know, these old-fashioned things of his first 10 fights, all of which were spectacular knockouts, and sent them to every single person they saw who wrote boxing. They basically went down a list and took the names of everybody and sent them these tapes, and we all watched them and went, oh my God, this guy's amazing. So, you know, naturally my editors were very interested in him, and I remember one of my editors saying, you know, go talk to this guy, he looks like a boxing linebacker, which he did, you know, he was built like, you know. So they sent me up to the Catskills to talk to him, and I was about 27 and he was 17 or 18. We were actually fairly close in age, even though I was 27. Most of the boxing writers were like in their 50s and 60s, and he couldn't relate to them. And we were kind of like, you know, we had a lot of things in common, you know, and it was kind of cool. Then he fought his first fight in New York City, like right after that. He came up and fought in New York, and after that we actually, I must say, I was a young reporter, and I probably got too close to my subject, quite honestly, because we were, you know, we had a friendly relationship. We saw each other, we would talk. We would talk about, you know, I would talk about my wife, he would talk about his girl, whoever the girlfriend was at the time. Yeah. You know, and we talked boxing, because we both loved boxing a lot. What happened there was, what happens when you become friendly with somebody that you cover, there always comes a point where you're going to write something they're not going to like. And they're going to say to you, I thought we were friends, bro. What happened? You know, we're not really friends. You know, we're friends, and I like you, but this is my job. And that happened pretty quickly between me and Tyson. By like 1987, we didn't talk anymore, and that went on for about 10 years. Yeah.
Now, building off of that story, just working with big profile names, you know, like Mike Tyson, or, you know, even the other boxing names that maybe you were even a fan around. What's that experience like, separating the professionalism and you being a human being? It's
strange. You know, I grew up loving Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, and I was covering the Golden Gloves for Newsday in 1984. The Golden Gloves used to be big. It was actually in the main arena of Madison Square Garden, the finals. And there was an intermission, and Ali and Frazier had been brought in as some promotion for something. It was like the anniversary of their fight or something. So anyway, they had this press lounge up on the 5th floor where everybody would go up and have a cup of coffee or whatever during the intermission. And I picked up, there was like an old-fashioned telephone, and I called my wife just to say, you know, hey, what's going on? This is how it's going. And I said, you'll never believe this, Muhammad Ali is standing right next to me. And it was the only time in my life that I was truly starstruck. But then, as the years go on and you deal with these people, after a while it becomes normal that they become your friends. And, you know, Muhammad Ali and I became friends years later, but I mean, the first time that I actually saw him standing next to me, I was like, oh my God. And I was shocked at how big he was and all. So, oh. And I was actually saying to my wife, you know, like trying to whisper because he was standing right here. I said, you won't believe this, it's Muhammad Ali right next to me. So that was, but it is strange, because after a while when you have to cover them, as I said, there always comes a point where you're going to write something they're not going to like, you know, and it's just part of the job, and that's why you kind of have to keep your distance a little bit.
Specifically with Tyson, you wrote a story in late 80s, and it went national.
Oh, I know the story you're talking about.
And talk about how, I guess, what you would like to talk about from that story and how difficult of a story that it was for you to write.
It was a difficult story. The story you're talking about is the allegation by his wife at the time, Robin Givens, that he was abusing her. And what happened was I got called at my home late at night. I wouldn't say late, like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, by a woman who identified herself as Stephanie Givens, Robin Givens' sister. And I was like, we've never spoken. I knew Robin a little bit from, covering Mike. And she said, I'm calling you from Spain. I think she was in Marbella. She was a tennis pro. She goes, I'm playing in a tournament here, but I need to tell somebody about what Michael is doing to my sister. So I was suspicious. So I said, I'll tell you what, I made up some excuse. I said, listen, I'm in the middle of something. Give me your number. Let me call you back. So she gave me, a European number with a prefix and a whole bit. I called back, and sure enough, the woman on the other end of the phone gave me, speaking Spanish, gave me the name of the hotel. I asked for Stephanie Givens. They put me through, and I said, all right, I guess I'm actually talking to her, because I was really kind of on guard about being set up. And she spun out this tale of horror, about the heavyweight champ beating her sister up every night,
Right.
And, I was a little skeptical, but I'm writing it down, and okay, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. Mike was training to fight Michael Spinks at the time, which was, to that point, probably the biggest heavyweight title fight since Ali and Frazier. So he was incommunicado. You could not get him. So the next day, I called the office of Robin Givens' mother, because she had a business office, and she was where she was plotting to steal all Mike's money. I think that was the business that she was in. And I said, listen, I talked to Stephanie last night. I'd like to get a little more detail on this. And they said, all right, come on in. So I come in to talk to her, and it's just me, and her name was Ruth, the mother, and we're talking across the table like this, and she's spinning out this tale, the same tale that Stephanie did. Suddenly I feel like these fingertips on my shoulder. I look up, and it's Robin Givens. And Robin Givens was, a big star at the time. She was in, I think it was head of the class, I think was the name of the show. And I was like, and she goes, oh, I didn't know you were here. And I'm like, at this point, I know I'm being played. Right. You didn't know I was here. I talked to your sister yesterday from Spain. I'm now talking to your mother, and you're surprised to see me. Right. So they give me this whole story, very one-sided, about what a monster Mike is and all. And I take it all down. I tape record. I did something that was probably unethical, but God, it saved my life. I asked them if I could tape record it, and they said no. What they didn't know is I had another tape recorder in my jacket pocket, which was running. So I needed to protect myself. I felt I needed to. So when I got back, I transcribed this tape, and I had a ton of stuff. And I wasn't sure what I had. And I handed it to my editor, and he read it, and he was a tough guy. He read it, and he goes, you stupid ass, they're setting this guy up for a divorce. So I said, come to think of it, now that you say that,
yeah, it kind of looks like that.
So now I had to spend the rest of the week trying to get Tyson, because we could not run this thing.
That's a task within itself.
It was always a task, but especially now, because he was at war with the media, hated me, we were not talking anymore, and he was ensconced in his training camp in Atlantic City getting ready to fight Spinks. And I called everybody I knew, all his friends, like boxing people, friends that I knew, mutual people that we knew. Nobody could get him. Finally, I called the chairman of the boxing commission, a guy named Jose Torres, who had been a boxing champion. I said, I gotta have Mike. He goes, oh, you can't get Mike. I said, I gotta have him. He said, why? What do you got? So I told him, and all I heard on the phone was, oh shit. He goes, I get right back to you. He hung up. About 5, and I was in the office in Newsday. This is a Friday night. It was about 11 o'clock at night. The phone rings. The kid who answers the phone goes, well, Mike Tyson's on the phone. Really switch it in there. So I went into another room, and he goes, all right, what do you want? So I said, well, hey, man, I hate to tell you, but I got to tell you what your wife and your sister-in-law are saying about you. And I read him all the stuff back, and he got really quiet. And he goes, it sucks to know that your family hates you, and like he turned into like a puppy dog from, when he first got on, it sounded like he wanted to kill me. Like, if we were at a table, he would have strangled me. By the end of it, he was thanking me for calling him. He said, really, thanks, man, for letting me know about this. I had no idea they were saying these things. And, then we were able to write the story with her side of it, with his side of it, and, what it means. And it was a huge story at the time. And they, of course, did wind up getting divorced, and she took a lot of money from him. We found out later that she transferred, like, $2 million of his money to her bank account just before she filed for divorce. It was an ugly thing. But yeah, it was a difficult story to write because it's personal. You know, you are getting into somebody's marriage.
Right.
You're telling somebody something they don't want to hear and that you don't want to tell them. You're not sure if you're being used by these people. You know you're being used by them for something, you know. And it's really hard to know how to play it straight so that you're not working, you're not carrying their water, right? You're not unfairly accusing this guy, but at the same time you're not being naive that he might be lying to you as well.
Right.
So we tried to play it straight down the middle. It was a big story, and I remember I think I taught a lesson on it last year.
Yeah, you specifically told us that story because of how difficult being a journalist is with your own personal relationships, but the moral problem, it's kind of like a moral fork in the road.
Where do you draw the line? I mean, it's somebody's marriage. However, it's Mike Tyson's marriage, so it's news.
Right.
You know, I mean, if it's somebody else, if it's, you know, some utility infielder on the Yankees, do I really care about his marriage? If there's a domestic violence thing, yes, I do.
Right.
But I mean, you know, if having a problem with, you know, they're getting a divorce, I don't care. I'm never going to write about that. I will tell you, though, what I found much more difficult. When I was covering boxing, I covered several fights where guys got killed. And I would have to, you know, deal with the, you know, get a comment from the wife or the mother or the father. I mean, that would, or actually, even worse than that, hold a vigil at the hospital while they're waiting, you know, knowing that this young man's going to die. I found that awful. I hated that. That was, you know, if I could, let's wipe one thing out of my boxing career, would be covering any fight like that.
And in that, how have you dealt with it, taking those fights and problems on as your own? Do you kind of separate work from going home
I
and
do
relaxing?
try. I mean, obviously, look, there are certain individuals that you like, you know, and you know, you'll go home and talk to your family about it and say, gee, you know, I wish this wasn't happening to, you know, Joe or whatever.
Right.
But, and I also found it difficult if I got to like a fighter, if I was covering the fight and he was getting beat up. I mean, I would feel the punches. You know, if it was somebody that I really liked, you know, I did not want to see him get hurt.
And you being
There were other guys
former
I didn't mind at all seeing them get hurt.
particular few maybe, and the fact that you were a former fighter, so you kind of taking the punches on as your own. You know what it's like.
Yeah, but I could also separate myself if I didn't know the two guys. It's like, okay, you know, this is what they do for a living, and it's fine.
Right.
Or if I honestly, actively didn't like one of the guys, I'd be like, yes, pour it on. But if I did like somebody, it would be very painful to watch.
All right, so you ready to get
I
into
am
this
ready,
next sauce?
man.
So this one's called the Bomb.
Okay.
So good luck with this one. We're gonna cheers.
You notice I haven't taken a sip of
I
milk
know,
yet.
I
You
know.
that, right?
This milk gets me through the entire interview, by the way. So cheers.
Okay.
So I'll only take one bite of that one because that one's got a real smoky taste
Got a
to
little
it.
afterkick to it. Yeah, it
Yes,
does.
and especially when going down. So you've been known to write with a clever sense of humor.
Just a moment.
Is it kicking in?
I'm waiting. I think this one was hotter.
Honestly, the combination of these three, it's kind of like 1, 2, 3
They
punch.
say, yeah. They say
It's like
the
a boxing
best
combination,
of. No, kidding.
a little bit. So you've been known to write with a clever sense of humor. How have you been able to, I guess, keep your writing approach fresh throughout the years while walking on this fine line of...
Well, let me start by saying not everybody thinks it's clever. Some of the people I write about think it's not. They have other ways to describe it. I basically write for my own amusement. If something makes me laugh, I put it in. I mean, that's how I keep it fresh. And I try to think of, I try to think of funny lines. If I think of a good one, I'll actually say, hey, listen to this. Listen to what I just wrote, But I think that's it. Don't write for anybody. I mean, look, I write for to inform my readers. To me, that's where it all starts and ends. But I also write for myself. I like to look at things and say, hey, hey, you know what? This one's hot. This one's hot.
Some hot. I might need a little milk break, to be honest.
This might be the first sip of milk I've had in 20 years.
Cheers. Let's take another one.
Okay. Oh,
All right.
I can't drink that much milk. Too much fat. It's good.
So the whole milk kind of helps coat the stomach and all the hot stuff going on down in our esophagus right now, and my tongue is actually pretty numb.
That one gets hot later.
Yes, it lingers.
Has like a secondary kick.
It lingers.
Yeah.
So back to how you write in your style of writing. Have you, do you have any particular stories in mind? I'm sure you've written thousands and thousands of stories, but do you have a particular couple stories in mind that you think you wrote with your best kind of clever, funny approach?
Oh God! I tell you what, I've never written a story that I didn't look at the next day and go, "Damn, I could have done better." To this day, never. And I try to teach that to my classes too. Like, look at your stuff the second day and see if you still like it, because generally I hate everything I did. The next day I see it. So I don't know. There were certain ones. I think probably the ones I enjoyed the most were the ones that were truly nasty. I can remember writing, a really nasty rip job of the Mets a couple of years ago that, I still kind of chuckle when I read it. And I killed Donald Trump in a column many years ago that I looked at just recently. I said, geez, this is still fresh. This was written today,
What was that particular column
It was about, he was trying to, look, I'm actually wiping sweat off my head now.
Need more napkins?
No,
All
this
right.
one should suffice. He was trying to get involved in the management of Tyson, as a matter of fact. And
that was probably the last thing Tyson needed.
but he went for it, believe it or not. Yeah, and I'm sure that that the future president got some money off him as well. But I just killed him, for wanting the publicity of being, involved with Mike Tyson, not really knowing anything about boxing nor caring much about Mike Tyson, but just wanting to be connected with it in some way. This was back in the 80s when he was a hotel, basically a casino host. And I was about to touch my face. That would have been a mistake.
Be very careful with
Yes.
that.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always try to get at least one or two lines into a column that makes me laugh, even if it's a serious column. To me, the best columns, the ones that I enjoyed as a kid, were the ones that sounded like the guy was sitting across the table talking to me. I don't want to be talked at, and I don't want to be preached to. I want to be talked with. Right? So if you want to talk sports with me, if you write a column that makes me feel like you're talking sports with me and there's some give and take there, I like that. And that's what I try to do.
And in your lead, you've taught us that the lead's that most important 1-2 punch to start the story, and that's where, in most of your writing in particular, that's where you get those little funny comments. And how important is
remember
is
what
it
I
to
always
start
said
like
to you
that?
guys? What did I say to you guys?
A lot of
If I
stuff.
don't like the lead, I'm not reading the second sentence, right?
Because if you can't get past the lead, how are you going to get past the rest of that
Exactly.
story?
And I tell my kids that all the time. This is the best sentence in your story right here. And what else did I tell you? You might be 400 words into the story and suddenly say, hey, I just wrote my lead. Happens to me all the time.
That happened to me in one of your assignments. I forget what story it was. Might have been the story that you had us do on Zion Williamson after after his shoe broke. When we wrote a profile, I think it was on him. And when you gave me my paper back, you said you have
Here's
your
your
lead
lead.
right there, and it was in like the last paragraph.
Yeah, but that's what happens sometimes. And, thank God for the word processor. It's very easy. You just take it, copy and paste, boom, and you put it up to the top. I tell them that all the time. It happens to me. I'll think, I might be backing into it. Maybe I'm not quite hitting it quite as hard as I want to. And then after like 400 words, I'm suddenly hitting my stride and I go, here's the lead. Let me change this all around. And to me, it's vital. It really is. Because the lead is like the first look into your house, right?
Okay.
Somebody opens the door of your house and your house is a pigsty. They ain't coming in. Your house looks good. They want to come in, right?
Right.
You introduce yourself. It's your first impression. It's the first impression you make on your reader.
And you only get one of those.
You only get one of those. That's correct.
So the next time that they filter through the newspaper and they see Wally Matthews, they're going to
Last
give
time
a
I
read.
read this guy, he scored the hell out of him. No, man, you got to suck them in right away.
One of my favorite starts, I think it was a lead that you had. I read in last year's class, and I forgot what it was word for word, but it was something in it. You said something like along the lines of more chaotic than a Lindsay Lohan bachelorette party.
Well, I used to use this. I know the line you're talking about.
Can you tell us that line?
No, this is what the line was. The line originally, and this is dated, so it's not going to work anymore. When the reliever came in wild, I once wrote, he came in as wild as Andy Rooney's eyebrows. Now, Andy Rooney was this guy on 60 Minutes who had these eyebrows that were just out of control.
Right.
But then after a while, Andy Rooney's dead, and nobody knows who he is anymore. So I said, what else is wild? I said, well, I guess Lindsay Lohan's bachelorette party was wild. Now I'm sure that's dated. I got to come up with somebody else.
Probably. There's definitely a good amount of things that you could think of. Talk about, your kids reading your stories? Do they ever
They
take?
don't.
Do they ever take
I don't even think
any
they know what I
jabs
do
on
for a
you?
living. No, they really don't. My kids really are not sports fans. And you know why? Because I do it for a living. So when I come home, we generally don't watch a lot of sports in the house. In fact, we almost never do. I kind of forced my son to watch the Wilder fight last week.
Okay.
Because I was into it and I had paid my $80.
Right.
And I was like, sit here and watch this with me, man. But generally, if I'm not being paid to watch a game, I don't watch. Okay. You know, let me amend that. When I was covering the Yankees, if I had a night off, I would certainly still watch the game.
Right.
Because I want to know what's going on when I go back tomorrow. But like on a Sunday, I know this is going to sound like heresy. I'm a professional sports writer. I will not sit in front of the TV and watch 3 football games. It just will not happen.
Gasp.
I
If
may
we had a
watch
crowd
one.
here, everyone would be like, "Oh my
I
god!"
may watch one, but
Okay.
there's no way I'm going to spend 9 hours watching football. I mean, I got too many other things that I'm interested in, you know, and it's what I do for a living. I mean, you know, you want me to watch a game, pay me. I hate to say it, but that's what it comes down
That's
to.
a
It's
good
my
way
business.
of looking at it, of course. 'cause-
So, and this is another thing that I taught you guys. When you become a sports writer, you lose your ability to be a fan. I mean, you know, you kind of, although you can still be amazed by what you watch.
no sports hat, no sports memorabilia in class.
no, that's right. No team apparel, because we're professionals, right?
You're right,
No
non-biased.
Tonight I got my when this thing airs, you know, when it gets up, I don't know what it'll be, but tonight the women are playing the Stony Brook women's basketball
Okay.
is playing a playoff game tonight, and they're going to do the game, and there will be no rooting, and there will be no cheering.
They're gonna sit there with their notebooks with the columns.
You better believe it.
Keeping
You remember
tally.
that?
I do.
We
I
actually
do.
already did one 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And, actually, I wasn't real thrilled with how they did. So we're doing it again tonight. We
All
have
right.
a do-over.
Well, practice makes perfect, right?
Yeah, that's right. But no team apparel and no rooting.
All right. So you ready to get to
I
this
am.
very last sauce?
I
Mad
am.
Dog 357. It's like the cherry on top of the sundae. So we'll get into it. Cheers.
Now, you know what? This one is more flavorful than that one. This one was just hot. I thought.
This one's
Not that you're asking me for my restaurant review, but
this one's gross. Well, both of these
yeah,
are
you don't like
gross.
this one?
No,
I like this one more than that one.
Really?
'Cause it's got a little bit of a flavor to it. I'm not sure what it is.
Might I say that you're absolutely insane for taking multiple bites of that. That's crazy. Wally
That's good.
Matthews, everybody. Wow.
Thank you.
We gotta add in the
Asbestos tongue.
clap sounds, right?
Yeah, I was born with a tongue made of solid steel. It was very good.
So
Got any more?
we have some in the tray without sauce, so you could have dinner for before your class if you'd like. So to wrap everything up, out of all the sports moments that you've witnessed face to face, I'm sure you've gotten this question multiple times. What has been your most memorable sports event that you've had to cover, and why? And can you remember it in detail?
Yes, it's a great question. The most memorable team sport moment, the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup in 1994, because of the amount of emotion in that building. I mean, you know, we all know 54 years they hadn't won the Stanley Cup. They came real close to losing the game the night before. Canucks were very tough. They came very close to losing the series with the Devils. And now here we are. It's Game 7. I believe it's a 2-1 game. There's one final face-off right in front of the Ranger goal with, like, you know, 2 seconds left in the game. And, you know, there's still a possibility that somebody can tie this game, send it into overtime, and everything just goes down. The emotion in the Garden that night was just insane. And when they won, I thought the roof was going to come off. I mean, it really was crazy. So that'll be the number one team sport. The number one boxing match that I've ever witnessed was George Foreman re-winning the heavyweight title at age 45, 20 years after he had lost it.
Wow.
Something that nobody expected him to do in 1995. That was an amazing moment as well.
Did he come out of retirement for that?
Yes, he did. By
Okay.
the way, I broke the story.
Wow.
And I'll tell you how. It was insane. I had called George Foreman. I was doing a story on the 1968 Olympics and the protests by John Carlos and Tommy Smith, who were two runners
Right.
who had raised a Black Power salute on the medal stand.
Historic picture.
And they were sent home, and then George Foreman came out the next day and won his gold medal and paraded a little American flag out. He was kind of like the antidote. So I called him about that, to talk about that moment. And I had never even spoken to him before. I didn't know him. Somebody gave me his number. And he was very cooperative. He was good. He was articulate. Told me what was going through his mind, what was going through their minds. Then at the end, I just said, I'm about to get off the phone. I said, so what are you up to these days? Because he had been retired for about 10 years.
Right.
He goes, well, I'm about to make a comeback. And I was like, what?
Just casually said it
Yeah.
to you on the phone.
I said, what? Because I didn't really know him well enough to say, you're full of it. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, write this down. He goes, I want you to write this exactly the way I say it. Because I said, why? What are you doing this for? He goes, write this down. He goes, I'm coming back for life, liberty, and the pursuit of my happiness. I said, okay, I think I got a pretty good
You got a
story
headline.
here.
You got your headline for
Yeah,
the
I got a
story.
pretty good
Wow.
story here. Yeah. So I'm forever in debt to him for that. So yes, he was retired for 10 years. Nobody expected him to be able to do anything. He was big and fat. He was a joke. And then suddenly, and
Making
he's losing.
Foreman grills.
He's right, and he's doing the whole shtick. He's a big old fat guy. He's the fighting preacher. He's the old man. He's all these things, but a fighter. So now he's fighting this young man, Michael Moore, who loses all 9 rounds of the fight. He's lost it, or I should say all 8 rounds. Lost every minute of the fight. And it's going to be like, nice try, George, sorry. And then suddenly in the 9th round, boom, Michael Moore is out cold, and George Foreman is the heavyweight champion again. And, the place went insane as the Garden did the night the Raiders won the Stanley Cup. So
did
those
you-
two were like 1 and 1A.
Were you able to, write your story right then and there?
Oh,
Were there too many
absolutely.
fans?
Oh, yeah. I remember my lead. It was something like break out the Geritol, which was something that old people drank, and, like toast the old man. It was something like that. It was, yeah, I was exhilarated by it. Really. Even though I didn't particularly like George at the time, and I really liked Michael Moore, and I knew his trainer very well. It was another one of those things where you get close to a guy
okay.
and he gets knocked out. But just the sheer insanity, the improbability of it was exhilarating, and I enjoyed writing the story. I actually think that story, if I read it today, I think I would probably like it.
Even years later.
Even years later, yeah.
Well, that's great.
But sometimes when the event is that good, you can't screw it up.
Yeah, and it's almost like I don't even want to put words to this because it happened. You know what I mean?
Unfortunately, they require you to
Right.
if you want to get paid.
You're correct on that. So, hey, you got through it.
It was great, man.
After
You took care of my lunch. That was wonderful.
The entire Wings gauntlet here on USG Hot Takes. Sports writer and Stony Brook journalism professor and part-time comedian, Wally Matthews.
And Wing
Wing Destroyer.
I had like 2 bites of everything.
Give me some. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on here.
I really
appreciate it.
this. I will take you out for wings one of these days.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And good luck to you and everything that you're doing as of right now. And good luck teaching at Stony Brook as well.
Likewise. Now, if I don't wind up in the hospital, we're covering a basketball game tonight.
All right, let's do it. So, to our viewers at home, our fellow Seawolves, thank you for watching this episode of USG Hot Takes with sports writer and Stony Brook journalism professor, Wally Matthews. Thank you for watching, and be sure to follow us on Stony Brook USG, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you.
My lips
was
are
a
on fire.
that was a
I
crazy
wasn't going to
one.
let you know, but man.
You're watching USG Hot Takes, the hottest show on campus.